This month's challenge is fruit, so I'm going to start with a blueberry and then I'm going to work on to a raspberry later on, which is a little bit more complex. So for the blueberry, it's quite basic what you need. I've got a rod of Effetra Ink Blue and the code on that is 058. I'm going to need to pull quite a thick stringer. I'm using a mixed enamel, which is a medium grey and a light grey. If you don't have enamels, you can etch or just leave it as it is. It'll look absolutely fine. It just gives it a little bit more detail if you've got some enamel or if you can etch it. Because I'm enameling a mask, a little piece of paper to shake the enamels over the top of. And that's about it really. I'm using a 1.6mm mandrel this time. Very often when I'm doing the demos I use a 2.4mm because of the shaping that I want on this one. It's easier to use the 1.6, but you use whatever you have, it's not an issue. So if I light the torch and I'm going to pull a thick stringer from the middle of the rod. You pull your stringers how you like obviously, but when I want a thick one I tend to pull from the middle because I get a consistent thickness then. So you'll have to excuse me now, I won't be able to see you now and take my glasses off. So I'm on the back of the flame. If you haven't pulled a stringer from the middle of the rod before, it does give you a nice even pull. And if you need a thicker stringer, then that's a really good way to go. If you've got a thin rod, a 3mm, 4mm rod, you might not need to pull a stringer because this is just for the finishing off. So if you think you can do it without a stringer, then go for it. I just like to have the stringer because I find it a bit easier. Decent gather in the middle, and you want to keep heating this until it's really glowing and the colour is even. And you need that even colour to get an even pull. So if you've got dark spots on your glass where you're heating it, then your colour isn't even. It doesn't need to be too big. You only need a few inches of this at the most. I can feel like getting quite gloopy now, but it's still got an odd dark patch on one end. So that's me ready to pull, so take it out of the flame and just let it ease off a little bit, and then you're pulling really slowly on this one. I'm pulling it on an angle so I'm hoping you can see it, but I want this to be quite thick. There we go. And I just burn off one end in the flame and then I snap the other ends with my tweezers. That's fine now. Those will do. There we go. So that's ready. While that's cooling down there, let's just stick a mask on. So I'm ready to go. So you're using the same rod that you've just melted to pull your stringer with. And if you're making a load of these, you could pull several stringers and have them all ready in one go, rather than doing individual every time. So I'm going to start off, I want to make a tiny little spacer beads. There we go. And you'll see how small this is in a minute. I'll lift it out of the flame. As the glow dies, hopefully you can see that. Yeah. And now now a bigger bead right up. I want to butt it up against the other one because I want them to melt together. But I want this to stay solid, so I keep the shape on this end. So now we look like this. And I'm going to, when I'm heating now, I'm going to concentrate the heat on this end. I don't want to distort this if I can avoid it. So I'm concentrating the heat on the right hand side of the bead by keeping as much as I can to the left hand side of the flame. I'm hoping that makes sense to you. It makes sense in my brain. But what I want to do is melt this second one up against the other to create a specific shape. Did I just see mica rolling everywhere? Probably. I was using a lot of mica yesterday and it's still all over the place. Almost ready. So lift it out of the flame. At this point I'm just going to use the radiant heat to melt the two pieces in together so that they form one solid piece without a join, without a distinct join, because you don't want to have a weak spot there. And I need a particular shape. Can't see if you can see it, so I'm hoping you can. There we go. And a tiny bit more heat and prepare for the enamel. I'm going to tip this bead onto an angle to get the enamel on, because I want the enamel on the bottom half only. You don't want a great deal, it's just to give it a little bit of a mottled finish. Keep that enamel back up. Just gentle heat now, you don't want to melt this bead back down, you're trying to keep the shape. Just melt the enamel into the surface. And then with your stringer, tilt your bead this way because you want to apply little dots all the way around, as close to this mandrel as you can get without actually touching the mandrel. You want the dots right up next to each other. Again, as close as you can get to each other. It doesn't matter if they melt in together a little bit. Nature is not perfect. There you go. Again, I'm hoping you can see it. So a little bit of heat here, and I want to press these dots flat down to create the shape of the blueberry. Now I tend to use the side of my torch top marver. Just a tiny bit of heat and a gentle tap. If you don't have a torch top marver, a pair of tweezers, you can use the flat end of your tweezers. I've got a pair of flat nosed tweezers that are quite useful, and literally you're pushing this flat towards the actual bead. And it's a tiny bit of heat, and repeat until you're happy with it. So you're keeping the dots and the uneven finish you want, but you want it to look fairly natural. And there we're done. A little bit of heat into the rest of it and it's finished. I'll be back shortly with the next one.